And we told you about that conversation we wanted to have, and we're about having it. It's about just a preview of the main event that ultimately will ensure that the Yanas in the Dagbon Kingdom are buried. Subsequently, we know that we had some disturbances resulting in the killing of Yana, Yakubu and Dani way back in 2002, and subsequently we've had a lot of disturbances in peace. Resulting in some clashes sometimes over the period. And, well, we had the setting up of the Otunfo-led committee of eminent chiefs, and they tried to negotiate and also broker some peace over this impasse. Subsequently, some truce has been reached, and it's culminating in the burial of the Yana. And since then, we've had some heavy police and security or military forces being deployed to Yendi in the northern region ahead of the funeral event or ceremony of the late Yana. We want to gather live. We also want to get to some of the main issues, but we have to speak to some of the issues right here on the show. We'll be speaking to a representative of the West African Network for Peace, WANEP. And in the meantime, though, we have to speak to Mr. Albert Young of WANEP. Good morning to you, Mr. Albert Young.
Good morning, and good morning to your listeners.
Well, and we're delighted that you're joining us this morning, but we also know that a lot would have been done before today. Or as of now, we have ascertained that security on the ground is up to its peak. Of course, that is expected. But ultimately, how would you summarize the work that has been done by the eminent chiefs, and more so led by the Otunfo himself?
I think that basically they have done so much. A lot has gone in since they were set up. There have been some challenges, but they have managed to go through those challenges and surmounted them, and we have reached where we are today. If you look at the type of conflict that they are dealing with, it is not an easy thing. It's to have come this far. So a lot has gone in. I know that they have done consultations with so many people who know better, and that has guided them in their strategies and facilitations. So I think that so much has gone.
Now, this disturbance, acrimony, animosity, or disagreement, how would you call it? Will you call it a historical conflict? Will you call it a generational one, etc.?
A lot of them still play a role, because if you look at this historical, I mean, it's as well generational. A lot have not gone on well in the past. And I should say that the things that happened in the past brought them this far. But thank God, there seems to be some light at the end of the tunnel. And that is what we all hope for and are working towards. That at the end, there should not be any seed of generational conflict that will be solved. And it behoves on those who are facilitating this process to be able to work well towards making sure that we do not sow another seed of conflict that would bedevil that area.
If you're familiar with the history of this conflict, or perhaps where we have reached now, perhaps you can recall that to us. But if you're not, then in just the recent past, what would you say may have been done to get to the point where we had these difficulties? Of course, we know it culminated, or even the death of the Yana may have been one of the pivotal issues to talk about.
Very often, I am tempted not to say much about the history, because that creates a lot of controversy. But I know that this issue has traveled to the court. It has traveled through commissions, and they are where we are today. The recent one, we know of the work commission that was set up by former President Kufuor. and a lot have been going on mediation processes by civil society, by
Now, we have come to the crossroads, so to speak. How important is this ceremony? Mr. Yao Yang, are you so? Okay, we seem to have lost him. But also, we'll be telling you about what the story has been so far. But look, let's look at this. Security analyst Dr. Kwesi Enin, who is also asking government to go all out to ensure that there's peace in the area, says that there's also the need to maintain that level of civility and calmness after the funeral. He spoke earlier on PM Express.
When you put that signature on that document, it doesn't mean you've resolved all the outstanding issues. No.
Okay.
All it says is that, look, this is a framework within which we can work to achieve that concept of lasting peace. Okay. So I am not particularly taken aback by what we are seeing, but precisely because of two crucial issues. One is the emotive issue. This crisis is driven by multiple interests and perceptions, but the issue of the emotions underpinning the way different stakeholders react, the ability to contain those emotions, otherwise they begin to have some security implications. And from the Guardian article, and I'm sure quite a number of other international newspapers are writing, other intelligence agencies are assessing the threat, because this goes beyond just Dagbon. It's about whether we are secure enough for people to invest here, whether our intelligence and security forces have understood the threat and can prevent it from escalating.
And meanwhile, the principal program of the Northern Regional Peace Council, Nuhu Abukari, says they have intensified engagement with key stakeholders to adhere to the roadmap as laid out by the Otumfuo-led Committee of Eminent Chiefs. He, however, urged the responsible use of social media ahead of the funeral ceremony.
The Council has been undertaking several preventive engagements involving the key leaders from the two sides, trying to ensure that two leaders respect the corridors of the roadmap and live and operate within the confines of the agreement. We are also taking steps to find out and then call on all stakeholders, including RESEC, to make sure that they encourage and ensure compliance in respect with what was agreed at Menchia. And Council has also taken the pain to speak to youth within Dagbon and beyond, encouraging them, telling them not to use social media platforms to cause any threat or infuriate any process, but say as they use the platforms as mechanisms for promoting peace within the country. We have also continued to talk and appeal to youth within the two sides not to take any advantage in insinuating or disrespecting any chief who perhaps is perceived to be a former, should I say, enemy to their own side. The funeral process is actually purely a traditional process requiring chiefs from both sides to take up roles and perform roles that legitimizes the funeral performance, and we are encouraging the leaders to call on their own supporters, and we are also meeting group leaders and meeting youth groups.
And we have Mr. Albert Yong, who is with the West African Network for Peace, on the line. And continuing our discussion then, would it mean that the important thing is to have the rites done, but after the rites are done, that soothe everybody's conscience and everybody's own curiosity?
I think that basically the roadmap is the tool to achieving peace in Dagbon. The question of how we arrived at the roadmap is no longer there because there is some kind of resolve by everyone in Yendi or Dagbon to have the funerals performed. If you say about 80% accept that there is the need to move forward. So if the roadmap is implemented according to what has been designed, in other words, the how of the roadmap is very, very important. And if you have the president and two, they said it must be implemented according to the customs and traditions of the home. And so everyone that is having a role or is to have a role to perform in the funerals should be informed properly and then be encouraged to participate. Both factions should inform each other when either funeral is being performed, because these are funerals of the entire family, the entire ethnic group of Dagbon. So one celebration should not be seen as a celebration of one faction like Abudu or Ambani, but that these are funerals of our former leaders, and we must recognize that. So even within the two gates, they should work on themselves. Abudu should work on themselves, and Dani should work on themselves, that they are seen as working together and carrying everyone along. So once that is done and the traditions are complied with, basically we think that this should not create any future problems. But however, even after the celebrations, a lot has to still go on. There has to be engagement, has to be surveillance, monitoring, there has to be bilateral communication with certain individuals, and then the youth have to be engaged, Excel has to really involve the Peace Council, one and other civil society institutions, the church. Everyone still has to be and make sure that at least we go through the process that is facilitated by the Otumfo-led community, gets to a stage where we can say we have sustainable peace.
But in order to continue the peace and also make sure that we get to the point where everybody is in a position to say, well, we're all satisfied, it means that post the funeral, we have to intensify the security patrols and also do the investment in the necessary security infrastructure apparatus to keep the peace going.
Exactly. Because the question that one can ask is, after the funerals, and so what? There have been some rough edges along the process. Some people would not have been happy. And the reality would have dawned on other people, because whether we like it or not, some people have become very relevant within this period. For the 16 years that they have been trying to manage this conflict, people have become very relevant. But that relevance that they may seem to have compromised within this period will become real after the celebrations. And so it will look as if their fears would then be confirmed. And that is when people can begin to react differently. And so it means that after the funerals, a lot has to go on. Security presence needs not just to be withdrawn within a short time. The key installations are still supposed to be monitored. They have to continue to make sure that the entry points to Yankee and Dagbon, key areas, have to be guarded and patrolled. They have to continue to monitor key installations so that if there is anyone who is behaving differently from what we expect as law and order prescribes, then that person should be easily apprehended and threats mitigated. So engagement, even education, awareness, conscientization, orienting the people, because now like reintegrating that everyone should be able to work together and go about their normal duty. So a lot has to go on, and civil society, the Peace Council, religious institutions have to continue this engagement.
But that's a lot of investment.
Exactly. But I think that if you invest in peace-building activities. Being proactive, preventive. Then at the end, we are able to save more than having a crisis situation.
Well, if this is seen to be a Dagbon activity, and so it's the people of Dagbon who need to be involved post the funeral activities, which other structures and engagements need to be done beyond what you have outlined to keep the awareness levels as a national action that needs to be taken?
I say that primarily it is a Dagbon activity, but it's a Ghana's activity.
Okay.
It's a West Africa's activity. Because if you look at what we call the transcendence of conflict, it's not only within Dagbon that we can have the crisis if we are not able to manage them well. Because we have people who have interest in the Dagbon conflict. We have Dagombers and people who are sympathizers, Dagombers, both factions. They are residing somewhere within the country. And even the Dagombers live among themselves from both factions, in various communities of Ghana. So it is a Dagbon conflict, Dagbon activity primarily, but then it is a Ghana's activity, and everyone should be seen to be interested in this. Because the image that this paints to the entire world is not about Dagbon, it's about Ghana. And so if we're able to pull through this very well, then we would as well be communicating to the entire world that Ghana is as stable as we know it to be. So beyond this, I expect the leadership of government to continue to do its work, preventive diplomatic activities. We expect everyone in this country that is seen to have the capacity to play on this conflict to be able to join and play his role, his role, so that at the end it's not seen as just a select group that is involved or that is interested in this conflict.
But I remember when the incident happened in 2002, I was in a newsroom. And of course, when the news came, nobody believed it. But everybody at the time, who were my seniors, top journalists of the newsroom, of course, many of them were older at the time, saw that this was a potential disaster. And I remember I was then in the newsroom of GBC Radio. There was, at the time, one practice that was always done. They put a hold on the news story. These days, they don't tend to use those guidelines in the newsrooms again. But then later, I think within that day, I got to know that I recall a senior telling me about a certain history about 28 years before then. People don't forget, do they?
People don't forget, but it depends on how you approach them, how you recognize what they feel, and how you want to, as we say in Ghanaian language, be in the to be able to feel how they feel and want them. So if people are carried through and they are made to feel that, yes, I feel what you feel, I appreciate how you feel, I know that you've gone through trauma, and so I think that we should move from here. And I want to support you to be able to do that. So trauma healing is one of the things that should be so that people at least say that, okay, but for this intervention, I probably remained where I was and think of a vengeance. But if we're able to go through this process well, trauma healing, trying to integrate people, I mean, phenomenally, some of the pain and the bitterness will dissipate. And they can feel part of entire society. So I think that it's not easy, but we should be able to encourage them and play roles.
Yeah.
And let them feel that yes, we are in this process. We are with you in this difficulty, so that they can follow.
Okay. Of course, we'll keep you on the stream. So, but we've been joined in the studio by Emmanuel Sowate. He's a security expert in his own right, and he's always on hand to help us do some great analysis on many other issues, not only intra-country, but also beyond our borders, Africa and the world beyond. But thanks for joining me.
Pleasure having me.
And, you know, when I was asking the questions, I was a bit cautious. There's some pent-up apprehension, etc. What role should the media be playing within this whole process and thereafter?
Okay, if you are talking about the process, you are talking about implementing of the roadmap.
Well, where we've reached and thereafter.
Yeah, okay, so the whole range of activities that have been designed. I think that the end of that spectrum might be a decade, if not more. If the end has in mind the pre-conflict situation where you had some level of trust among the two parties. It is more complex than just two, but for easy analysis, we compartmentalize them into two. For you to go back to the pre-war situation, usually it takes a long time for people to heal. It's a gradual process. It's also transgenerational. So, for example, the older generation who might have witnessed earlier one, maybe 30 years ago, when they experience it, maybe into early 10th of the century, it brings back the flood of pains. And sometimes people do not deal with the trauma, they avoid it. You know, they are two different things. So going forward, with the media in particular, I think so far, so good. You've given the platform for facilitators to air their views, and also those who have concerns. Usually you situate the factions, within and across factions, into two perspectives when it comes to implementing peace agreements. We have those traditionally called spoilers. I don't agree with that terminology. The spoilers usually means that people who are not for the roadmap. And then you have those who are seen like facilitators, or those who are willing to enable the process to roll out. So if you are not careful, you might unnecessarily give the platform to those you think are facilitated. But sometimes the spoilers are key players, and they are able to change their orientations and their suspicions and their discomfiture are able to gradually evolve depending on the response of state actors. So the media, so far so good. What you can do, continue to give the platform, show the positive sides, and also show the concerns as much as you can of those who quote and unquote are seen as spoilers, or those who have concerns. And then I'm sure that we can move ahead from there. It will take a long time. If I may add one quick wonderful, when it comes to, I don't know what my colleague out there said, and when it comes to the implementation of peace agreements, you know, it's a very, very complex process.
Yeah.
In fact, especially in the immediate aftermath of signing of a peace agreement, some would say comprehensive peace agreement, you realize that some of the factions or the antagonists might go back to war. So, for example, Rwanda, Angola was 93, and then Rwanda 94. They went back to conflict after signing peace agreement. Angola almost 350,000 people died. Rwanda almost 800,000. Liberia almost 150,000. These are staggering numbers of people who died because peace agreements have failed. There are so many reasons, but generally, I believe that where there is the will, there is the way.
Now,
I like the
Yeah, because you see, during that event, I went for holidays at my parents' place in Ashaiman. I was then in the newsroom. I was living in Accra. And in one of the communities I went in, my usual areas in Zongo, somebody who was a Dagbon person went to pull an old archival material, you know, and was telling me what this meant. And I also got interested at the time. So it looks like information is passed on, and now even technology has added to cremating information, so to speak, for history and for posterity. How is that going to influence next generational people, or the next generation? And how can that information be diluted in such a way that it is not acrimonious or could not be harmful in taking us back as in a relapse?
Okay, when it comes to the use of information in warfare, it's a very complex process. And when it comes to how you are trying to historicize or put the conflict into historical perspective and show how from generation to generation information are stored, are retrieved, and then are transmitted. Yes, it's a complex process. For example, when it comes to tradition, which is one of the key modes because we are a very oral society, people sometimes invent tradition, add to it, remove from it to make their case sound good. When it comes to even recording in books and even video, what you might record as important, somebody else might not see as important. How then do we put different perspectives into, like, shepherd them for peace, sustainable peace, self-enforcing peace? It takes time from the individual level to the national level. Why do I say it takes time? It takes time and effort because, you see, we have so many competing identities, so many competing loyalties, so many views of what justice and injustices are. So because at the individual level, the lineage level, the clan level, ethnic group level, different factions, people would always want to recall their sources, want to recall their pain, and narrate it to the younger ones because it's like a continuous fight. Let me give you an example. I already mentioned the theater. There was a time that when I was in charge of research at the National Peace Council, I was dealing with a conflict somewhere, and then I met somebody. He said that because of the conflict, a man had died, and we can talk about how some of the conflicts almost invariably precipitates an increasing number of female-headed households, but that's for another time. What happened was that the woman was sweeping, she was a widow, sweeping under the bed of the child, I think like 8 years, and then he saw a lot of money, and then he was angry that, my son, your dad had died, I'm trying to groom you to become a responsible person, and he started stealing. How can you do that? Because they were coins. You know what the boy said? He says, no, mommy, the money you've been giving me to school, I'm saving the money to buy a weapon and revenge my father's death. The boy was about 8 years. So if life expectancy is even about 56, so it means that in the next 50 years, ceteris paribus, if everything remains the same, this child is thinking about how to revenge the father's death. So the pain is so deep, and if you have questions, I'll take. But one thing that I think it bespeaks to is the fact that as much as possible, prevent conflict, as much as humanly possible, from intelligence gathering, from early warning, from media, from civil society, from government.
So you're saying that picking up the intelligence is more important so that you are proactive. You don't have to perhaps relax your efforts so that you don't then get a relapse. That's what you're
certainly saying? When it comes to conflict, yes. Even after signing, you see, people not a lot. Okay, let me take that back. A lot of people think that the signing of a peace agreement almost automatically translates into a linear progression, i.e., you gradually inch your way towards I like the self-enforcing peace, self-enforcing sustainable peace. But no, it is reversible. It is reversible big time. Some of the challenges you might not foresee in the comprehensive peace agreement, but some might be lurking around because there's one thing you have to always bear in mind. The factions are also tactical. They have strategic thinkers behind the scene. They have people on the tactical level. So sometimes when they sign an agreement, areas that are vague, areas that they didn't push, sometimes they sit down and wait when it gets to that particular activity. And they think that given the broader activities around the conflict that they are seeing, they might support it. In other words, they might live up to their verbal commitment and written commitment, or they might say, no, the interpretation is not right. So it's a very complex thing, and we should always have that referring to that. Dealing with or implementing peace agreements are very reversible. Some of the issues you might not anticipate, but yes, beyond that, within the broader national framework, it's always good to be proactive and not reactionary. Ironically, paradoxically, what happens is that even at supranational levels like ECOWAS, AU, UN, you attract more fund when there is doom and damnation. When you are stable, money doesn't come. In other ways, violence attracts more money than peace.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of money to maintain the peace.
And worse, when there's violence.
Yeah, of course. And that's when the money also doesn't keep coming in.
And people benefit. War entrepreneurs is big business.
All right. So we have Hashmin Mohammed on the line. He's our correspondent on ground. to give us an assessment of what the preparations have been so far for the funeral of the Yana, and is going to take place tomorrow. We also know the effort that have been put in by the police and the military to ensure that there is security or some semblance of security that is maintained on ground. Good morning to you, Hashmin Mohammed.
Good morning, Roland.
So what can you tell us by way of what you've seen so far, other preparations, I mean comprehensively?
Well, yesterday, the Municipal Security Council, the contractor working on the temporary palace, handed over the temporary palace to the Municipal Security Council. And I do understand that the Municipal Security Council will also hand it over to the Abudu royal family. As you are aware, they will start the funeral of late Yana Muhammadu Abdullahi from tomorrow till the 28th of December, before the Andane royal family will also have the opportunity to occupy the palace and perform the funeral of late Yana Yakubu Andane. Now, I am told by some historians that from today onwards, the Bolen Lana is supposed to move to Zuhai. It is a community within the Yendi municipality, and at that place, there are some customary rites that are supposed to be performed before the ritual shaving of the hair tomorrow. And when the ritual shaving of the head is performed, the hairs are supposed to be collected and then placed at the royal mausoleum, at the place where his father was buried. And I am told, because Dagbon is not in a normal time, there are some of the issues. Maybe the kingmakers will have to find a way of addressing, because the time given for the funeral wouldn't be enough for them to perform all the rituals. And so the kingmakers will have to find a way of addressing all those issues within the shortest possible of time.
But we're told security is there and everything, but how comprehensive is it?
Well, the security presence, a combined team of police and military personnel are heavily present at the palace, not only in Yendi, but at strategic locations. And you recall 2 days ago, the Regional Security Council also visited the place to reassure themselves of the safety of Yendi. And they visited the Dagbon region, and then they also visited the Bololana, and then the chief kingmaker of Dagbon, that is the Kuga Na. And at that meeting, they reassured the Regional Security Council reassured the Ghanaians of their readiness to be able to provide adequate security for their funerals.
How has this been done? I'm talking about bringing in security and making all the general announcements with the youth involved, or we've had everything stampeded on them?
Well, in terms of the funeral itself, to be honest with you, there are still a lot of issues. There are still a lot of acrimony between the two families, especially within the Andane royal family. It appears there are a lot of cracks within the Andane royal family. It appears they are divided into two, because the group that represented the Andane family to sign the roadmap to peace appears to be losing their influence over the Andane royal family. And that is the problem. You recall 2 days ago, when an interview was granted to the Dagbon regent, he categorically stated that those who represented the family to sign the roadmap are yet to visit him and present the details of the roadmap to him. And the Andane family are also saying that they want the funeral of late Yana Yakubu Andane to be performed in line with custom. And I am not sure, but maybe from now up to the 4th of January, there are still a lot of things that can be done. But it doesn't appear that the Andani royal family are ready for the funeral as it stands now, because the people that matter most and then have huge influence over the Andani royal family are the people who are raising these issues. Even though there are some groups too within the Andani royal family who are also family heads who are given assurance that the funeral will be performed. But I am just wondering how that can be able to be done without the participation of the Dagbon regent.
But at the end of the day, the activities look like they are going ahead.
Yes, for the Abu royal family, the activities will go on from tomorrow onwards. They will kick-start all the ritual ceremonies that will facilitate the funeral of late Jana Mahmoud Abdullahi.
Okay, Hashmi Mohammed, we'll get back to you so that at least you can give us what the latest is from there. But Mr. Sowati, at the end of the day, the activities are ongoing. But if something needs to hold the families together, what should it be?
Okay, so you said the activities are going.
We'll go on. Yes.
Yes, you are right. You are not wrong at all. But there are peripheral activities and there are core activities depending on the context and the situation. So, for example, you have some groups. Okay, let me situate it within a broader theater so that you understand. He raised a number of issues. He referring to your correspondent. He talked about sometimes even within a faction, there are different people of different orientations. Depending on the context and conditions, some might brand them hardliners, moderates, and then maybe at the end of the spectrum of the moderates, extreme liberals, who would put peace ahead of others. And then there are others too who would say that we should hold on to culture and tradition. Now, once you talk about culture and tradition, they are very complex. You need to have deep contextual understanding to appreciate some of the seemingly mundane utterances that people might make. So somebody will say the funeral has to be performed in line with custom and tradition. It raises an issue. For example, for large chieftaincy institutions and families, you cannot perform a funeral without naming a substantive chief. In fact, actually, sometimes it's the substantive chief virtually who performs the funeral of the other one. So when you want to say that, okay, perform the funeral and then stop and not name a successor, it's an innovative that is being introduced for the sake of peace. Some might be comfortable, some might not. So for example, before you perform a funeral, usually the idea, generally, you know, there are differences.
Because of
no, when I say our part, even in the Gomba land, it might be different from Gonja, it might be different from Akan. So I'm using it broadly. What happens is that when they say process, for example, before you name a chief, you bury a chief, there are certain processes that you go through, 1, 2, 3. So it follows. That is how you legitimize the chief at the end. Without the processes, in this particular case, if somebody is dead, without going through the processes, going to particular places and things like that, without those processes, the end result, which is installing a chief, will not be legitimate in the sense of culture, so to speak, although culture evolves. Okay, so when people are saying that we should do it in line with culture, you need to have a lot of patience to understand what they mean by that. Because when you understand painstakingly what the processes mean, the hidden informations in there, that this group of people going to this room means that legitimately they are trying to tell us that they are installing the new person or they are not installing the new person. When you understand all the details, then when you are negotiating with the person or you are talking to the person, when the person says that it has to be done in line with custom and tradition, you let the person understand that custom and tradition are evolving. In this particular case, it may be unique, it may not. But then when you say in line with custom and tradition, the end goal cannot be naming X or Y, but it will truncate at a particular place because of the broader piece. Because when you just take it as the person saying that you have to be done in line with tradition, and you say, how does it go on? Maybe for him, what would have to happen is what he or she sees as justice. And the end is having a kin in this perspective. So it's very complex and bringing people together within the same family. The other thing the gentleman said, your correspondent, which is very, very important, is the issue of, you know, repeating myself, the division within the same family. How then do you bring in those who are not comfortable? Because the fact that somebody says that he's representing the family or not doesn't mean that the person has broad consensus. And that is where I went. That implementing peace agreement is complex in this part of the world where you have plural legal system, where you have so much information and meanings attached to finite detail. For example, they are going to perform a funeral. People might come on horses. What does the riding a horse mean? They might be playing certain drums. What does it mean? They might be in a certain parading in a certain way. What does it mean? Those meanings are very, very important, because when you glean those meanings, then you're able to go back and then proactively start thinking about the likely scenario, worst scenario, best scenario, who are the key actors, how do I engage them from which angle. Those are the things that you do gradually for sustainable peace. But sitting in Accra and not being on the ground, sometimes it's very difficult. But my experience over 20 years shows me that every statement, every cultural activity has a role to play in ensuring, I'll repeat myself, self-enforcing and sustainable peace.
Just yesterday, or I believe 2 days ago, I was interacting with a friend of mine who is an MPM from the area, and was saying that, look, it's long overdue, the funeral needs to go on. And then another one also from within the same area also said there are undercurrents that looks like not everybody is satisfied, and from both sides. Now, in order to reach out to those who may have any reservations after the event has gone on, what should the status quo be? Because there will be a committee that has undertaken its work, its recommendations have led to a roadmap, but after that, its work has ended. The country is left with this scenario. What should be the work of the structures in place, and which structures are we talking about to reach out to who, especially those who look like they are not satisfied?
Okay, so you said 3 key things in terms of sustaining the process. Okay, so when it comes to peace agreements, sometimes depending on the context and condition, I don't like generalizing. You have people who would craft or design the roadmap, and then sometimes those who would implement it. Sometimes the roadmaps are doomed from beginning because they are unworkable. Sometimes the environment for implementing the peace agreement is not ripe. Sometimes, depending on the context and condition, external actors are so influential that it's like a proxy war. So there are so many issues that come to play when you are dealing with peace agreement and sustaining it. Now, you talked about, in the literature, in the past, they used to call them spoilers. They are not spoilers. And people with major concerns. How do you reach out to people with major concerns? Interestingly, humankind is very interesting, that people change. But of course, if you change too often, you are fickle-minded. But so what happens is that you might brand somebody as very uncooperative and very difficult. But when you reach out to the person might change their position, because usually hidden somewhere are issues of fear, mistrust, concern. Yeah. And in this part of the world, concern does not only have to do with the living, but also the dead. If I die, how would the ancestors hold me? That they give you this tool, you're not able to protect it. So all those things might not sound sensible or appreciable if you are trained from the West. But if you are culturally sensitive and you want sustainable peace, you give the people some platform to air their grievances. How do you reach out to them? I think that in this particular case, without being specific, you can have elderly statesmen. One person I've not heard, but I'm sure might be playing key role, is former President Jerry John Rawlings. At least he has so much influence.
Especially on this issue.
Yes, and I wouldn't mention the faction, but it's obvious. He has so much influence.
Especially on this issue.
Yes, exactly, this issue. Jerry Rawlings has so much influence. And I don't know the extent to which he has been rolled in, extent to which the challenges are being discussed with him, the extent to which he's offered the opportunity to say that I think that this and that. And I'm sure that President Kufuor also have some level of gravitas to bring. They might vary in terms of what each would do at what level. But I think they're important. What my over 20 years experience in this conflict, peace, security, development tells me is that very often, and I did that a lot when I was at the Peace Council and even the UN, somebody would always have an influence over somebody, depending on the context, and the influence might vary. So, for example, you are dealing with a very difficult person from one of the sides of the antagonist. The person who might have so much influence might be somebody who is stark illiterate, illiteracy from the Western perspective, but who is believed to be spiritually powerful and potent. And in the village somewhere that maybe it's usually he doesn't have light. But it is that person that gives this leader some form of spiritual protection or perceived spiritual protection. When you're able to reach that spiritualist through usually another spiritualist who might be a moderate, you might be able to gradually influence. So it's not a straightforward affair, but you always want to look for somebody. Sometimes in active partisan politics, it might be somebody who is married but has a girlfriend who is 17 years, but listen to the girl big time.
How should we gravitate towards this sort of posture? And do we have the gravitas for it?
Oh, Gan, of course we do. You have different levels of influences. Repeating myself, re-emphasizing, what I was trying to say is that you need to do your background checks well. Who are the key combatants? Yeah. What are their ranks? Because they have ranks from general to corporal.
Exactly.
And sometimes it changes. Each referring to the post changes. So if you're able to identify the key people and their consent, you know that on issue of the guy's fear, which is paramount, this person can deal with it. In issue of he being afraid that he needs a guarantor, maybe somebody in the diaspora has a role to play. Because in all these discussions, people have not talked about the diaspora. Diaspora is very critical. When I say diaspora, those outside Ghana, because there are people in Accra, Kumasi who have influence.
The area.
Yes, but you can say diaspora. If you're in Yendi, diaspora can be even Tamale. But I'm talking about those outside.
Actors who are related to either the socio-cultural surroundings of the area.
Sometimes it can be through marriage. It can be through marriage.
Or to the issues themselves, but are outside the boundaries or the jurisdictions.
Those whose action and or inactions.
The diaspora.
I'm focusing on the diaspora. So diaspora broadly defined. Okay. America, Britain, Germany, Switzerland. Because of phone, because of easy communication. Yes. Distance is death. So people can influence from various distances, and sometimes at tactical level.
Yeah, I've noticed that the conversation have always, this time around, veered or tried to divert itself away from the political state actor influences. No, for example, no politician wants to be seen to be related or perhaps even seem to have made any utterance, etc.
Openly.
Yes, openly. But the thing is, at one point in time or the other, in order for the post-ceremonial issues to influence the peace, the state will play a critical role. The one that manages the state or the entities that manage the state are governments. And it could be a government of today or tomorrow, etc. What role should they be playing in this?
One role is to, as much as possible, remain neutral. There's some, I'm sure you know this word hocus pocus. You say one thing in public, you do something else, or you say one thing and then you do something else. So humankind is interesting. So that is where intelligence plays a key role.
Right.
That you might not openly say it at particular time, but what you do behind the scenes might be different. So we are talking about what can state actors do. State actors, we can talk about the security, you can talk about the executive, but let's talk about politicians as defined, the two key political parties. I think so far what you said is true, and it might be strategic that nobody wants to be seen to be stoking the fire. Because even when it comes to signing peace agreements, antagonists are very mindful generally of not losing the hearts and minds of people. In other words, they want to win the hearts and minds of people. And I think that in this part of the world, I think that the best government can do is to stay away from such mediation processes. Because anywhere they have political interest, they have the penchant of trying to find a way of getting some level of influence so that they'll make sure that at the end of the day it translates into vote. But I think that being neutral and providing the political will across board is one of the key roles to play. But to conclude, finally, winning the hearts and minds of ordinary people is how you sustain this peace.
Thank you very much. Emmanuel Sowate is a security expert and helping us.
I prepare a student of security, although I have 20 years.
Is a student of security. Has been practicing this, influencing this over the last 20 years, worked with the UN, the National Peace Council, teaches and practices in civil society. But we're talking about the ceremony going to ultimately be called the funeral ceremony of the Yana. There are two of them, right?
Correct.
Two of them, yeah, correct. All right, so ultimately we're going to have those discussions ongoing. Hashmin Mohammed and the rest of our team in Tamale and Yendi, they're monitoring the situation there, and we'll bring you many other discussions on the subject. Also, somebody who had joined us within the conversation was Albert Yeljung, who works with the West African Network for Peace. But we'll keep you posted on many other things related to Dagbon. In the meantime, though, we're going to have a great discussion on how we're regulating small-scale mining in our country and what the position is. The interim committee, it's an inter-ministerial committee on illegal mining. We're going to have a discussion with the secretary to the committee, Charles Bissue, right here. Stay with us.